So, Dave, this is an interesting turn of events. It appears that China has a problem with the NBA. We just lay out for us, if you would. Let's just start, I guess, with the NBA's relationship with China, and then we can start talking about why what a GM from the Houston Rockets tweeted out became so controversial, and then I guess we'll broaden it out as to what it says about these sports leagues.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA relationship with China, in so many respects, it really starts 19 years ago with the drafting of Yao Ming as the number one pick of the Houston Rockets. That becomes very important that he was drafted by the Houston Rockets. And that led to this incredible upsurge of popularity in the NBA, and particularly the fortunes of the Houston Rockets in China. And over the last 2 decades, that's blossomed into an incredibly profitable multi-billion-dollar relationship between the league and between the country of 1.4 billion people. And part of this relationship is not just about the formal deals between the NBA and the People's Republic of China. It's also about sponsors that NBA players have, clinics they do overseas. Some players, when they're done with their NBA career, they go over and play in China, like Stephon Marbury. So there is so much cross-pollination that exists between China and the NBA, and it's proven to be incredibly profitable for the league and incredibly important for China with regards to just basic state propaganda in terms of them opening up to the West, or at least signaling to their own people that they're open to the West.
And the Rockets are because of Yao Ming, the one of the most popular team in China.
Yeah, they're so popular in China that for a while, I don't know if this is the true now, but for a while when Yao Ming was playing there, you would have a bench player for the Houston Rockets be one of the top selling jerseys in China, more than players like Kobe Bryant or Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh.
I mean, the Rockets became, in so many ways, ubiquitous, tied to the NBA and tied to China's love of the NBA. And so the word that I think I probably would want to use is synonymous. So if you're thinking about the NBA, you're thinking about the Houston Rockets.
Interesting. Okay, so everything's moving along here. I mean, and it raises a lot of, I guess, other issues. I mean, we're seeing this right with tech companies in terms of the way they deal with China. I mean, and maybe we can get to that in a moment, to the extent that there's any other sort of like complicating factors. China right now has concentration camps for almost 2 million Uyghurs. But they have responded, and there are protests in Hong Kong that have been ongoing. And that's basically where this latest controversy gets kicked off. Tell us how.
Well, you have a general manager for the Houston Rockets, Daryl Morey, put out what it was a pretty innocuous tweet, just saying that he stood with Hong Kong in their protests. But when he sent that tweet, I mean, my goodness, I mean, you can't overstate the degree to which I forget if I can curse on this show, Sam.
No, you cannot. But
I cannot. Okay. Well, let's just say a snuffleupagus-sized mound of feces hit the fan, just from this one tweet. And when this tweet hit the fan, let's just say that, the response by China was immediate. I mean, they started banning games on CCTV. That's their state-run television. They talked about canceling deals with the NBA immediately, and the NBA immediately backtracked as well. And they clearly pushed Daryl Morey to not only delete the tweet, but send it, like, really crawl through glass and send out this fulsome apology. The NBA put out two different statements, one in English and one in Chinese. The Chinese statement twisted the knife even more about how sorry they were to have offended China. And a lot of people then, though, pointed out the hypocrisy of the NBA, which tries to market itself as a quote-unquote woke league, as a league that's not the NFL, as a league that's progressive, as a league that listens to concerns about racial and social justice. And the gap between that, and they're willing to just crawl an apology to China after this tweet. And that gap led to all sorts of backlash against the NBA from politicians, Republican, Democrat, the op-ed page of the New York Times. I mean, the Trump tweet is coming because it's a combination of people who are progressive and want to see the NBA live up to the values that it espouses, and then some of the worst actors on the right wing,
right.
People like Ted Cruz, Barry Weiss of the Times op-ed page, who are saying, oh, look at the hypocrisy of this wokeness when they don't care about China. Meanwhile, the Ted Cruz, Barry Weiss, people of this ilk, Marco Rubio, if it's countries that they support that act in an authoritarian manner, they're all too silent, or even they applaud those actions. But because it's China, they're quick to rush to the pulpit. So it's led to just this absolute political maelstrom that's surrounding the NBA. And so they tried to respond to another step the next day. And Adam Silver himself, the commissioner of the NBA, he put out his own statement where he just absolutely reaffirmed that the league believes in freedom of speech and supports Daryl Morey to that regard, but that they also understand that they've offended China and they're greatly sorry for that. And they want to work to have people understand some of the cultural differences about why this is such a third rail issue.
Well, like from China's perspective, is the idea that we're going to discipline the NBA in the future, is the idea that we're going to discipline all entities that come in from the outside, whether it's different companies or whatnot. Like we're setting a precedent, and this is sort of like the Fonzie thing, right? Where I mean, I'm dating myself, but the Fonzie on Happy Days said that he only had to punch one guy once, and then everybody thought that he was. Is that what we're watching? Punch the first guy first, and then you don't have to punch anybody else again?
Well, first, let's be clear. I mean, Fonzie exists outside of time and space, so there's no such thing as a dated Fonzie reference.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Second thing. Oh, no problem. Second thing is the people I have spoken with who study this issue and who have been immersed in what's happening in Hong Kong and immersed in just the history of China's authoritarian practices say absolutely that this is a shot across the bow. I mean, the same week that China made this decision to really go back, like respond really tough on the NBA just over a tweet. They also banned an episode of South Park that appeared last week that criticized China and had South Park scenes taking place inside of labor camps and the like. And so this is very, very much what's happening is China is concerned about the rising protests in Hong Kong, concerned they're having an impact on consciousness inside the mainland of China as well, and are making every effort to try to quash any sort of cultural megaphone that could raise solidarity with the people in Hong Kong.
And it's, I guess lastly, for the NBA, this is just a purely, we just can't afford to lose this cash, and so we're just going to kiss as much buttocks as we possibly can. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward, yeah. I mean, there's that old expression: if you owe the bank $1 million, then the bank owns you. If you owe the bank $1 billion, then you own the bank. This is a case of China, in some respects, now owning the NBA. Because the amount of money and the financial entanglements are at a factor greater than anywhere on earth, with the exception of the United States. And China, unlike the United States, the NBA feels only has room to grow.
Why can't the NBA, and maybe this is the corporate mentality that they don't want to risk any money, but why can't they say good luck telling our 1.4, I mean, I don't know how many fans they have in China, but, it sounds like maybe hundreds of millions of fans.
Yes.
There's not going to be any basketball. Bye.
First of all, they do count the number of fans in China of the NBA in the hundreds of millions. So, and that's why they view the market as so incredibly important to their future growth possibilities. The NBA doesn't take a hard line with China because the NBA feels like it needs China more than China needs the NBA. China can shut down the NBA and go on being the world's banker, basically. But the NBA absolutely needs China for its future economic health. And there have been some sports writers who've been attempting to write about this and saying things like the NBA should just say, we are doing no more business with China because we don't do businesses anymore with authoritarian countries. And it's like, hello. I mean, you might as well be asking a dog to meow. I mean, you're asking the NBA at that point to be something that it's not. It is a global brand. It is a global corporation. The most important part of this story is that, to me, is that from the NBA perspective, is that they've been caught between a rock and a hard place. And the hard place is China, but the rock is their embrace in recent years of this kind of woke marketing. And I think it's exposed for a lot of people how paper thin it is to say, hey, we're cool, we're millennial, we're progressive, we're woke. Because then eventually with corporate politics, the rubber hits the road.
Right. Folks, don't, I guess the lesson is to be learned is don't kid yourself. They're a corporation.
Yeah.
They got one reason and one reason only to exist. All right, let's turn. We got 5 minutes left here. I want to talk about this because I think this is huge. In California, the Gavin Newsom signed SB 206. This is going to change, or could, it seems to me, college sports as we know it permanently and dramatically. Tell us what SB 206 is.
Yeah, and first of all, by my count, 8 or 9 states are already picking up similar legislation. So, I mean, we're talking about like the absolute beginning of the pulling of the thread on the sweater that is the NBA. That is the NCAA. SB 206, what it is an NIL bill, and NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. What it does is it says that if you play for a university under the auspices of the NCAA in the state of California, you actually can control and profit off of your name, image, or likeness. That means if you want to appear at a car dealership and sign some autographs, you can do that. If you want to hold a clinic in volleyball because you're a star volleyball player, you can do that. If Wheaties wants to put you on a cereal box, you can do that. And before now, all that stuff has been absolutely verboten. You have not been allowed to do it. The NCAA has cracked down on you, has removed your ability to play the sport if you do so much as sign an autograph and take a dollar bill. So it's a huge change in terms of the control that college athletes can have over their personhood, really. And a lot of this started when a great basketball player named Ed O'Bannon was in somebody's house and noticed that they were playing him in a video game, and it was a video game that he didn't even know he was on. He's just watching himself on the screen. Wow. And so that's where it started, and that's where we've gotten to where we are today. The NCAA is absolutely furious. Athletic directors around the country are furious. But I feel like the forces around SB 206, they just have so much logic and popular will on their side. I think what we're looking at is the future.
All right. Well, and I applaud it, but my reaction is necessary, insufficient, because you are basically only paying or allowing only the superstars to profit, and they're profiting outside of the actual labor they're putting in that benefits these schools. Like, why does the guy who's sitting, the fifth guy on the basketball team, why does the guy who just is, he's an offensive lineman on the football team, but he's getting his head caved in? He's gonna have the hip problems for the rest of his life, and he's helping to make one of these Big Ten colleges millions of dollars. Why doesn't that guy get paid?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I agree with you. I think if we look at this as the start of something that we can build upon, then it's much more palatable than looking at it as like an end unto itself. But I also want to say that one of the things that this opens up the door for is, like, say that offensive lineman wants to hold a clinic back in his hometown and get paid for doing that. They can do that now. Or like where I live in Maryland, the UMD, University of Maryland women's lacrosse team is incredibly popular among that community of lacrosse players. Like the stars on that lacrosse team can now go to high schools or get paid to do a talk at a high school. So it opens the doors up for all athletes in a new kind of way to be able just to profit off of being themselves. But you're absolutely right, like especially when we talk about issues of healthcare, being guaranteed your scholarship, and being able to get a piece of the billions of dollars in TV money, because that's really the golden goose that we're talking about here. That is a fight that we still have to wage. And
just lastly, I mean, there was a movement, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I can't, time has lost all context for me, to unionize college athletes. We just got a minute left, but what's the status of that movement? Is there anything happening? Will this help in some fashion, or will it hurt?
Two things. One, yeah, it was quite a few years ago. I can't believe how many years it's been since Northwestern was attempting to organize themselves. And so you haven't seen any movement on that since then. Actually, a lot of states passed legislation to prevent college athletes from doing just the same thing and following suit. But I think in this situation, now that money has entered the equation, collective bargaining all of a sudden is in play. And so for college athletes who want to unionize and want to organize, I think that the openings now are open in a way that they weren't before SB 206 was signed into law.
Well, Dave Zirin, thanks so much for filling us in both about the NBA and China and this latest bill that has just come out of California. I mean, it's one of those situations where I hope what starts in California crosses the country. Definitely saw that with the roller skates, I remember as a kid, since we were walking down memory lane, and skateboards, if I'm not mistaken. Dave Zirin, always really just a special treat to talk to you about this stuff. You always have insights that we can't find anywhere else. Thanks so much for your time.